Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast. I have another wonderful guest for you tonight. Welcome, David Roberts. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So, David and I did a podcast interview a while back for his amazing podcast, which is called People with Purpose. So, we're really going to kind of dial in on that topic tonight and actually talk about purpose, what purpose means to David, why he's so passionate about that topic, and what purpose also means to you as an entrepreneur, because we all need to be in touch with our purpose and connected to it and really delivering on it, because otherwise I think we just lose everything, really. So it's a great topic that we're going to examine today. And before we get into it, I just wanted to introduce David. So he's managing director of New Heat, which is an underfloor heating and renewables firm. And he's also a board advisor, mentor, and podcaster, as I already said. So his podcast, People with Purpose, helps people unlock and execute their purpose in business and life. So let's get straight into it, shall we, David?
Yeah, let's do it.
What does purpose mean to you?
Well, it kind of means everything in a way. It's one of those things where, from a work point of view, you spend a lot of time at work. So knowing why it is you're doing what you're doing, and that helping you with that kind of just getting out of bed every day, and picking yourself and pushing yourself forward. I guess I found through my career that from a work point of view, being in that situation where you're wondering why it is you're doing what you're doing, really didn't really help me at all. And I found working for businesses and in businesses where I didn't really believe in what the business was doing, I still worked hard and I still kind of wanted to put a shift in and help and do the right thing, but it didn't feel right. And when you connect what you think about with what you feel, that's then where you get that energy and that drive to really push on and make things happen. And I've got this this view that if more people could unlock that inside of them and actually harness that as energy and as a force for good, then the world would be a much better place. So that's where I'm coming from.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with that. So, David, in terms of your own background and history, have you come from a corporate background or have you been a lifelong entrepreneur? Because now, obviously, you're managing director of your business, but, what's your background?
Well, so I kind of went to inner city school in Bristol in the UK, and it was a great environment from the point of view of learning a lot about sort of different cultures and different people from different backgrounds, but it wasn't a really high performing school. So it was sort of quite a tough inner city background, and then I did okay and went to university. And then I got back from university, and my mum and dad. I remember getting home, getting to my mum and dad saying, "So what are you gonna do now?" And I said, "Well, I don't really know." And I said, "Right, okay. Well, you're going to sign on then?" And then things started to click into place. And then they said, "Well, if you're going to sign on, then so we better have a third of that for the housekeeping then, and you're going to get housing benefit and all this sort of stuff." I spoke to my parents about this recently, and they don't remember the conversation in that way, in any way whatsoever. But actually, what they did was they encouraged me to think. Actually, it's up to me. If I leave what happens next in my life up to other people, then where am I going to end up? I'm going to end up nowhere. So it's up to me. So that kind of kicked me into action, and I did go into the kind of standard get a job type route. But I found that I learned a lot from that. I'd always wanted to sort of start my own business, but I never really had the courage to do it. And so actually going into business and into the corporate world and moving from job to job a bit, climbing the ladder actually gave me quite a good grounding, so that when it came to a point where I wanted to be a bit more entrepreneurial, I had those skills, and I had learnt a lot about what makes a good business, what makes a great business, and also what makes a bad business to work in. So yeah, so that's kind of how my journey started, really.
Oh, that's really interesting, David. So do you think that purpose is to do with leadership?
Yeah, I do. I think it's it's that alignment between your own personal purpose and what you spend your time doing. And this doesn't have to be in business. This can be uh, yeah, in your own business, or it could be from the point of view of if you're working in the corporate world. If you can see that connection between your purpose and your values and what the
Mhm.
organization that you're working for stands for and stands against, then it means something to you, you know. And like I say, you invest a lot of your time working. So yeah, so I've kind of looked back at my career, and I found when I made the decision to make a change, partly it was because the career progression and I wanted to move on, but actually the most telling reason for me wanting to try something else was because I didn't feel that alignment with the culture. I didn't feel that alignment with the mission, if you like, that the organization was on. And so when it's come to running businesses, either on behalf of somebody else or for myself, the first thing I want to understand is, okay, so what is that mission, and how is that mission being led? And so that connection between purpose and leadership, both on a personal level and organizationally, is really, really key.
Mm. So you are a board advisor, aren't you, David, as well as being the managing director of your own company? So when you go in and you advise other boards, is this one of the things that you're always looking for? And do you find that many businesses get it wrong, or maybe they're confused about their purpose, or then just not communicating it properly?
Yeah. I think it could be all of those things. I mean, the worst case scenario is where you've got something that's just written down and that nobody pays any heed to. And again, they talk about the purpose, they talk about the mission, they talk about the values, and really, actually, it's all about the money. And you know, when the bottom line performance isn't panning out the way it's been planned to, or the way that the shareholders have been told it's going to pan out, then everything else goes by the wayside. I actually believe that, flip that on its head, if you've got a really, really clear burning passion and a really, really clear desire to do something, or to make a difference in some way, and you can then find a way of translating that into a service that you can give that's the right quality for that market, and then start doing that. And even if you're a startup and it's just you, maybe, or you're like a solopreneur, actually you're always working with other people. You're always working with, you know, joint venture partners, or there'll be people that are supplying you, or your customers, they're going to be your partners as well. So that
Yeah.
kind of leadership is really crucial, whether you're a solopreneur or running a business with hundreds of people in it. If you've got that alignment with the mission, and then actually then, and it's a service that is of value, then the profit will follow.
Oh, definitely. I completely agree with that. And of course, there are lots of statistics to back that up, aren't there, about purpose-driven businesses, and people-driven businesses tend to be much more profitable than profit-driven businesses, ironically, because you'd think that, well, if they're focusing on the bottom line, then, you know, that means that they are going to be more profitable. But as you rightly pointed out from your own experience, people tend to leave businesses that are just all about the money, because the money doesn't trickle down to the employees. And we all have this instinct, don't we, for self-actualization, for alignment with, you know, something that is more meaningful than just money. At least most of us do, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with money being part of the reason why you do something, I don't think, because what's that? There's a quote. Money is the measure of the value that you create. And I believe that's very true. It's just a case of what comes first. And
mm,
if you're a leader of people, then it's about service. It's about making sure that you're serving them. They don't work for you, you work for them. It's your job as
Yeah.
their leader to make sure that you create an environment where they can be successful. It's about understanding the unique capabilities of the people that you're working with, whether
Yeah.
they're employees or whether they're sort of suppliers or partners. And then it's about putting something in place which is simple enough and systemized enough just to be able to flow through and deliver that quality service every time. One of the things that I do is I support the Institute of Customer Service as a VP, and
Mm-hmm.
they do quite a lot of research, and they've found that companies or businesses that deliver service above the benchmark for that sector, in 1 year potentially 10% higher revenues fall out of that, because you've got that reliability, that consistency over the 5-year period. That drops a bit, perhaps to about half that, but you're still outperforming your competitors by offering a better quality service. So there's
Mm-hmm.
definitely a business case for good service.
Oh, most definitely. And I think, particularly in my industry, there's a lot of focus on customer acquisition. And well, in fact, in every business, really, which is obviously to do with the bottom line, how can you get people in and, keep your pipeline full and so on. But actually, returning customers cost you less because there isn't the same cost of acquisition. And they tend to spend a lot more. They tend to spend around 3 times as much as new customers. So what does that actually come down to? That is down to how you treat them, isn't it? And their experience. So I totally agree with that, and everything that you say completely resonates.
Hmm.
And it's something that so many people, they just they don't really get the importance of that, do they?
No. And in today's world, we've got all this volatility, all this uncertainty. And so what people need to be able to do is to be able to trust the companies that they buy from.
Yeah.
And so when you look at customer satisfaction as an example, another piece of research from the Institute of Customer Service shows that if you score somebody 9 out of 10 for customer satisfaction, you are pretty much twice as likely to trust them as if you scored them 8 out of 10. Now, 8 out of 10 sounds pretty good. So the difference between 8 and 9 out of 10 is like 10%, but it's double from the point of view of trust. And
Wow.
and also you get 3 times the potential for referrals and recommendations if you score a 9 out of 10 for customer sat as opposed to 8. So those kind of details that you can work on to make things easy for your clients and to make things as frictionless and mean they have to make as little effort as possible, really bump up that kind of customer sat or customer experience score. And then at the same time as achieving that, you're actually, by making it easy for your customers, potentially making it easier for your teams, whether they're insourced, outsourced, whatever. And the easier or the less effort it requires for your people to give that good service, the less barriers there are in the way, the less friction there is to giving good service, actually the happier they're going to be. There is
Oh,
a
yeah.
correlation between that employee engagement on the one hand and customer satisfaction on the other, which is an untapped potential for growth and for giving more value for businesses that doesn't have any dependency on the external environment. So you can go through life saying, oh well, there's a recession, there's hyperinflation, there's this, that, and the other. These are all external factors. They're excuses. Don't use excuses. Focus on what you're doing, and really harness the power of that brilliant service and that employee buy-in, if you like. And it starts with purpose and then flows through from there.
Yeah. While you were talking, I was just remembering one of the agencies that I work for. So it was an advertising agency actually called Young and Rubicam. And I remember it was a few days after I started working there, and I think it was April the 1st. And we came into work and everybody had like a pot of daffodils on their desk and a little card that said, welcome to the spring. It's a, time of fresh possibilities. And I just thought, wow, this is really amazing, to have just this little reminder that it was completely unnecessary. And it's those little unexpected extras. That is the thing, isn't it? That going above and beyond to show people that you care. That is how to link people's needs with your purpose, isn't it? As a business.
Yeah. And little things like that are brilliant. I mean, it doesn't take much financially, but it does take a bit of thought. And what those things do is they do give people confidence that actually they are valued.
Yeah.
We talk about TNTs. So TNT is as an explosive, but if you look at TNT as a tiny noticeable thing, it's those things that do make a difference. And in the current climate that we're in, as I've said, there's people who are very concerned about cost of living, and people want fair pay, and quite right too. But all of those TNTs, if you like, and there being that culture of togetherness, and if you've got a business, no matter what size, it's definitely worth spending a bit of time to think, okay, so what are my values, even if it's just for you, because it starts off with, like I say, your personal leadership, and then how that then flows through the organization, and no matter how small or large it is, because those values then play into, okay, so how am I going to behave, how am I going to treat people, and how am I going to expect people to treat each other, and then it's not all down to you then, is it, as the founder or whatever, the team begins to live by those values, and they give each other little TNTs. So, so you as a leader, it's important that you kind of set the example and role model the way, but also provide an environment where people can, if they want to buy a small gift for their colleague because they've done something great, or they want to recognize a team member for doing something brilliant, that they are empowered to do that, because it makes a massive difference.
Oh yeah, it really does. And I love that. And in fact, while you were talking about that, I was also remembering another thing that this business used to do, which was that it had like games. So anybody that they've been working really hard and their brains were getting really frazzled, and you could just go out and have a game of table football or something. So they had all these games tables and things like that. So basically they were sending out the message that, look, it's okay to play, and in fact you need to play, and we want you to play, we want you to kind of take breaks and have a good time and all the rest of it. And yeah, I mean, I think that as you said, all it takes is, how much does it take really to kind of install like a table football game in a working environment? Not a lot really, but you are sending out a powerful message, aren't you? And it is all about those actions really, isn't it? It's not just about what you say, it's about what you do in order to show people that you do care, right?
Yeah, absolutely right, because people know the difference. People will definitely know if you care about them or
Yeah,
not.
they will.
Because you do, don't you? If you're talking to somebody and you get the impression that their eyes are darting around the room and looking for, are they looking for somebody else? You don't get that kind of connection, do you? And
No.
I think yeah, there's a great book called Radical Candor.
Oh yeah.
Which is by Kim Scott, and that talks about caring personally, but also challenging directly.
Oh.
So if you can care personally about the people that you work with, and like I say, in your team, virtual team, whatever it might be, you're in a position then to be able to challenge directly. And if you get that wrong, then people will know you're being either disingenuous or being a bit obnoxious or maybe being manipulative
Uh-huh.
or whatever it might be. So that's a great book to kind of to read and reflect on. Okay, what's the kind of communication culture that you want to
Mm.
have with people that you work with?
That's really, really interesting. And I remember reading a book as well called Crucial Conversations, which is about having difficult conversations, which is, very, very similar. But I love the sound of that book. Radical Candor. Is that what it's called?
Radical candor, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And in a way, I mean, business is life, life is business. We are not different creatures magically because we are working, whether we're working for somebody else or whether we're working for ourselves. So very much the same principles apply to our personal lives, don't they, in terms of finding our purpose, aligning with our purpose, and delivering on our purpose, don't they, David?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I find it really, really empowering when I see an example of somebody who is living their life with intention. I find it really, not empowering is probably the wrong word. Probably inspiring is probably the better word. When you see somebody intentionally and consciously doing something, and it could be to help other people. It could be an endeavor or a hobby that they just love, and to somebody else it could be the most dull thing in the world, but they just don't care. They love sitting by a lake with a fishing rod in their hand for 9 hours overnight, whatever. I mean, I go out running, and I go out doing some quite long runs over the moors of the southwest, and some people think that that's bonkers, but actually that's just me fulfilling my my purpose in a way, because I find that I get feed from that. I find myself enriched. It's good for my mental health, and yeah, and I think the principle of knowing what it is that you want in your life. If you ask people, well, what do you want? It's sometimes the hardest question to answer, because we so often feel like if we say what we want and we try and get what we want, we're being selfish, we're being greedy, we're not thinking about other people. And then all of those feelings of guilt or shame or lack of self-worth or whatever can feed into that. But if you can just take sort of small steps towards finding those things that make you happy and dedicating the time in your life to be able to do that, then everything that you do outside of work, in work, whatever it is, helps you to kind of stretch and grow a little bit, and be your own person. And it's so important to be authentic to who you truly are.
Mm. So, yeah, this is a firing off all sorts of things in my brain personally. So, I was just thinking about sacrifice and about the concept of sacrifice and about, for me, love is sacrifice. So, I think if you love somebody, you have to be willing to sacrifice things for them. Otherwise, you don't really love them. So, with your children, for example, we all make sacrifices for our children because we love them, or at least we should do as parents. We, choose not to sit and watch the TV. We go upstairs and read them a story instead, when they're young, or we forego maybe some material luxuries for ourselves because we want to buy them a pair of new trainers or something like that. So love is sacrifice, but also we need to make sacrifices to cherish and love ourselves, don't we?
Yeah.
Because if we just prioritize others without also prioritizing our own needs, then we are not loving ourselves and we're not fulfilling on our purpose. And in turn, that will make us, it will reduce our capacity to love others. So is it about kind of creating a balance between, the need to care for other people and the need to prioritize our own needs and purpose?
Definitely it is, because if you think about it, and I don't know whether this, but who said this, but if you can't love yourself, how can you expect to be loved? but also if you can't love yourself, how can you expect to give love? And it's it's very, very hard when I've been in a situation in my life where I've felt unloved, or my love has been unrequited, or whatever it might be. It's a very poetic phrase, but when that's happened, then what's that done to other parts of life? Well, it's made relationships with friends more challenging. It's meant that I've looked for problems instead of solutions in different scenarios. It plays forward into so many different parts of life. Whereas if you've got this this sense of self love, then that then plays forward into how you interact. If you've got love, you want to share it, and then people naturally migrate towards you because you're a nice place to be. So yeah, I definitely had to go through a bit of a journey when I was a child. I grew up in a loving family. I was very lucky from that point of view. But I did go through that very, very human phase. It still happens now, every now and then, of defining myself in the eyes of other people, rather than thinking about or rather than being comfortable in my own skin. And if you can forget about the criticism of others, and if you can forget about what other people think about you, because invariably, by the way, when you think someone's thinking about you in a kind of an adverse way, they're probably not. And so it's not even just what they're thinking, it's your perception of what they're thinking, which is just also wrong. So and it's just a negative energy that doesn't actually help with anything at all. So yeah, flip that on its head, surround yourself with like-minded people, and love yourself and love them along the way.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I mean, I don't know about you, but I certainly feel that in the past, I don't think that I was a confident version of myself in the way that I am now. And I look at my children who are in their 20s, and I see them gaining confidence, but I don't see them with the kind of confidence that I have. And I think that they probably look at me and think, well, that's just the way she is, and she was always like that. But no, I wasn't like that. And I think for me, it's been a result of really, life's long experience that has kind of brought me to this point and given me that confidence and that sense of purpose. And I think when I was younger, I was much more easily swayed by the opinions and the demands of others, because I'm naturally quite a sort of easygoing person. And I'm just wondering whether you think something to do with the passage of time and just life's experience actually makes us, step into our purpose.
Yeah, it can do. I mean, I've got an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old daughter, and if I start talking to them about finding their purpose, I'm just going to be talking a completely different language to them. A purpose doesn't have to be this big lifelong thing. It is for some people. For some people, it isn't. Some people, it's something really simple and straightforward. And so, over time, it does crystallize. There's this thing about if people are trying to kind of work out what their purpose is, or find their purpose inside them, I think it's important to look inside of yourself as opposed to looking outside for it. But if you look inside of yourself and think, okay, so what can I do that can help others? Again, it means that you're thinking about things from the point of view of thinking about something that's bigger than yourself, and then that takes you away from the whole kind of introspective side of things. And if you can then take that forward, and also think about if you're younger, you can do that. If you're older, then maybe think back to when you were 8-9 years old, and what were the things that you loved doing, and really think deeply about what were when were those happy times where you felt free, where you lost track of time, And for me, it was in conversation. It was socializing with friends, and I used to, not when I was 8, perhaps bit after this, I used to kind of be quite into music and the whole creative side of things. So follow that thread to find things that you can relate to. I mean, my wife was laughing at me the other day because she read an article that said all the DJs from the 90s are now starting their own podcasts. And I was a DJ. I was a DJ in the 90s. Actually, you can see my some of my vinyl there.
Oh yeah,
And she said, well, so you and all of your old DJ mates, are they all doing podcasts? It's like, actually, a couple of them are actually. So there are definitely clues for you in your past, things to look out for, things to perhaps latch onto, and also things to move on from. But it's very, very important to be leaping towards something rather than purely leaping away.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. And yes, funnily enough, it was always my passion and my dream to be an author when I was a child. And still now, I mean, I'm a really prolific reader. I usually have about 8 books on the go at any given time, which is, I know, a bit nuts. But anyway, that's what I like, and I've always been that way. And I just love to write. Writing is my absolute passion, and it's just stayed with me for the whole of my life. But I think what happens is people's values do change, don't they, as they go through life. And I know that for a really long time, my social life was very, very important to me. And I see that with, particularly my eldest daughter, that, we obviously are connected to one another. We're social creatures. And, at times that kind of drive and that desire can become very strong, can't it? So is there sometimes a kind of push me, pull you thing between the sort of external facing purpose, which is connected to other people and our place in a community, if you like, and our internal drivers like creativity, for example?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's this whole thing about, I suppose it plays back a little bit to what I was saying before about if I feel a connection with the organization that I'm working for, then there's a bit of a sort of a golden thread there, if you like, which means, I can see why I'm doing that, and then I get energy from that. I was talking to somebody just today actually about their life experience, and when they were 8, 9 years old, they used to love nature, the outdoors, playing in the woods and all that sort of stuff. This guy's now an environmentalist, and so those kind of things do they do have a bearing. I think it's important to understand that it's within everyone's gift to be able to, if they're in an environment which isn't working for them, people can change their external environment. It takes courage. I'm not saying that it's easy, but if you can think of a time in your life where you've been in a situation that you knew wasn't serving you, I imagine everyone listening can probably imagine a time like that, and they can think of an example where they've stepped away from that situation into a different environment. Sometimes people feel trapped, and sometimes people have to make really courageous moves, and I understand it's not easy, but it is possible. And so if you're in an environment that's not serving you, then the first step really is to be aware of it, and then to accept it, and then to decide to do something about it, to step into an environment that is going to help you out. Now, that might sound a bit optimistic and idealistic, but I've got this genuine belief in humankind and our ability to be able to take control of our own destiny, which is again why I'm very focused on purpose. Because if you haven't got that as a reference point, and your purpose in that moment might be, I've got to get into a healthy environment, but you've got to take that step. So environment's crucially important, but we do have influence over it.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting point. And, I come from, let's just say, a family of addiction, right? So I've been around a lot of addiction in my life, and I've been at times sort of dipped in and out of, 12-step, be it Al-Anon, because, particularly my brother, who sadly died of alcoholism. So in that particular situation, I know that there are a lot of people that feel as though they don't necessarily have the resource to be able to leave a very challenging or difficult relationship. And so what they have to do is redefine the internal landscape. And that is really what that kind of Al-Anon or that 12-step thing is all about, that we don't always have the power to actually change our environment, or maybe it's more complex than just being able to walk away, say, from somebody who, you know, is maybe dependent on us but destroying themselves through, you know, their own choices or whatever. So in those kind of situations, what the programs, for example, teach people is that, you know, you can detach with love. You can actually you can take care of yourself without enabling another person, even though you may be still in that same environment with them. And that concept was personally very powerful for me, because I think a lot of people find themselves in relationships or situations or marriages or whatever, where they are living with somebody who is very difficult, and maybe they are in circumstances that are less than ideal, and they have to kind of make the most of it. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is just to say, you know, in terms of purpose, you know, really to open up the discussion. Is it possible to live your purpose when you're in a close relationship, let's say, with somebody who is working against your purpose?
So it's a really tough one. It's a really tough one. So many people find themselves with a kind of a burning desire and a burning passion for something, and feel that they can't do that because they haven't got the approval of their loved ones, or their family is saying, because, and sometimes it can be in a kind of an abusive scenario, and sometimes it can be actually just because they're fearful for the other person. You can't do that, and it's inside you. It's inside you, right? So if Viktor Frankl, in Life, in Man's Search for Meaning, can live inside his own head, if Nelson Mandela can be in jail for 25 years and then come out and, you know, then take power and not go into recrimination mode and come out with forgiveness, then it's definitely possible. If you've got two twins, and I've seen this, two twins growing up in a family where you describe the whole kind of thing with alcoholism and drug dependency. One becomes an addict, the other never touched a drop. It shows that there is the potential. Two people can come from exactly the same environment, and they can make different choices. Now, that doesn't come from the external environment. That comes from within. So part of the reason why I started a podcast called People with Purpose was to raise that kind of awareness, because the best thing really is to be aware of something like that before it happens. And self-awareness really is kind of the root of everything, to my mind. So yeah, and then potentially, if you're in a situation which is like that, then your purpose is inside you. You then got decisions to make about how you bring that to reality, and there are some alternative options, and sometimes it means staying in the relationship. Sometimes it means having an honest conversation. Sometimes people are just misfiring, and it's just a misunderstanding. But sometimes it's not a healthy relationship, and you've got to make that difficult decision.
I guess life is full of choices, isn't it? And, you know, how we deliver on our purpose and how we honor our own purpose and the choices that we make is very much an individual thing. I mean, I certainly know that now that I am not with my husband, for example, who I didn't feel would have been particularly supportive of me doing something like this, for example, I certainly feel a lot freer. And I'm not saying that I wouldn't have done this, but I don't think that he would have supported me to do this. You know, he
Yeah.
probably would have said, well, what are you doing that for? What's the point of it? You know, and of course, you and I know that as podcasters, if we have a message that we want to bring to the world, if we want to make the world a better place, that is enough of a driver to go out there and actually create a podcast, because there are lots of people with lots of great ideas and a lot to say whose voices are not being heard.
Yeah.
So in a way, we have the opportunity to stand up and kind of lead and be the voice of those people and actually ask the questions that maybe they're interested in, but they can't ask for themselves. So I think that is the power of podcasting, really, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Another book that's worth looking at as well is the 5 Love Languages.
Oh, heard about
Because
that.
yeah, and it's definitely, I've listened to it on an audiobook, and it kind of, a number of light bulbs went off for
Yeah.
me. I've got so the 5 love, this is going to be the test now if I remember them all. 5 love languages are receiving gifts, quality time, words of affirmation, physical touch, and acts of service.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah. So they're the 5 love languages, and the premise of the book is that being in love lasts for 1-2 years maybe. After that, it's more about talking in each other's love language and understanding each other's love languages. And it comes from your upbringing. So it's very rare that 2 people in a relationship have the same main or 2 main leading love languages. So one thing that book suggests, which I think is a really, really good idea, especially if you're in a relationship that's challenging, and where any kind of feedback is taken as criticism and it becomes, confrontational, or you end up with stony silence, is to have a think about what your partner's love language might be, and if their love language is receiving gifts, or if it's quality time. And if you're not giving them quality time, then just start to give them quality time. The physical touch thing, by the way, isn't lust. It's kind of just contact and closeness and all that. Lust is something different. But it says if you can begin to behave in a slightly different way. Now, this, if you think about all the continuum of relationships, there will be some relationships at that end of the scale where, no matter what you do, there's going to be real challenges. But for the broader range of relationships, rather than having the conversation, behaving in a different way, that they have done research, and they have found that after a few months, I can't remember the detail, but after a few months, the other party in the relationship said, I've really enjoyed that recently. Is there anything I could do for you? And then you could then say, well, actually, I really like, it'd be really nice if you could say thank you to me every now and then for doing this, that, and the other.
Or buy me a few presents.
Well, exactly. Now, receiving gifts is my lowest one. So I'm a cheap date from that point of view. But I'm quality time. Quality time is my thing. If I to the extent that if we're away on holiday and things aren't going well with the family, I get really grumpy because I'm getting what I don't want, and I put so much pressure on it that but I actually make it worse sometimes. So being aware of it, it's really useful. It's a great book.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Just as you said, that self-awareness and the way that our upbringing drives that. I have to say that my mother was very much one for presents. For her, that was clearly her love language, because she would always turn up, bearing gifts. That was
Mm.
her thing,
Mm.
which my sister really hated because she felt as though that was just, you know, a meaningless gesture because she wasn't being loving in other ways.
Yeah.
And it's quite funny, isn't it, that, you know, looking at it through that lens, it was like, well, they're just those values are different. So
Yeah.
fascinating.
And it works
topic.
from it works from a work point of view as well. There's a guy I've been working with at New Heat for 7 years, and we get on brilliantly, but every now and then we just misfire, and I'm convinced it's because we got different love languages. So
Oh.
I'm now trying a different approach. So Mark, if you're listening, I'm not doing voodoo on you. This is just me trying to make sure we have a more productive working relationship all the time. But yeah, it just helped me in that scenario as well as on a kind of a personal perspective. So
Okay, right. So find your purpose with other people through the Love Languages book. What's it called again, David?
it's 5 love languages.
Oh, the 5 love languages.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So that's a great recommendation. Well, David, we've had such a fascinating and really enjoyable discussion. I just wanted to thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. And can I just ask, if people want to get hold of you, what's the very best way for them to do that?
Yeah, sure. So the best way to get hold of me is probably on LinkedIn. David Roberts is a very, very common name, but I've
Yes.
tried to make myself distinctive by having a very bald head, and also I've got a blue background on my LinkedIn profile. So yes, and it's the same background on Facebook as well. It's David Roberts, and obviously the People with Purpose podcast is on all channels. If it's wrong to promote a podcast on somebody else's podcast, but that's
No,
just
it's not.
all of my contact details are on there, so that's probably the best place to look.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, David. It has been absolutely great. And as I said, we did an interview together as well. So my interview with you is on that podcast. So definitely, if you've enjoyed this, then go and listen to that as well.
Definitely
Okay.
hear it from the other end of the telescope.
Yeah, that's